what language are you using? So in the
Mm,
language of Western medicine, it looks like Parkinson's,
okay.
right? In
Yep.
the language of Chinese medicine, it looks like trauma response.
As humans, we experience a wide range of crazy emotions, and these emotions can come up during challenging times that seem to hit us out of nowhere. That's the purpose of this podcast, to teach you how to move through these difficult situations and harness these emotions that we feel to be able to create the life that you want. My name's Nathaniel Burke, and I'm the host of the Emotional Fitness Podcast. I hope you enjoy. All right, Barbara, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy life to speak with me and to have this discussion. You sent me your resume and just going over it, it's so full, so inspiring. And I've known you for quite a while. And every time we have discussions, your perspective is always so different from that of mine. And I absolutely love it because it challenges me to change how I think a little bit and just look at things from a different angle. So maybe do you want to just introduce yourself to the guests and the audience and what you're doing right now, and we'll go from there.
Sure. Barbarah Nicoll, I'm sitting in a little house in Glade in the Central Cities in BC, and it's kind of a snowy day. Winter has come back. Sitting in my kitchen table with this beautiful piece behind me by a local artist.
I love it.
Yeah, it's called The Story of Creation, I think it is.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's big. Anyway, bequeathed by a friend who's now passed on. And I think she gave it because we had a wall big enough.
Oh,
She knew we would appreciate it. So what am I? Grandma, wife, auntie, sister, daughter, all those things, niece. I'm a mentor at Antioch University in the individuated master's program, and
oh,
also a doctoral student there in the Doctor of Education and Educational Practice with the Waldorf cohort focus, just in my research phase of that. I'm a mentor with the Rudolf Steiner College out of Toronto for people who want to understand anthroposophy at a foundational level. So often people that are going to go into Waldorf teacher training need to take that, um,
oh.
yeah, that kind of thing. And I offer courses through the Transformative Learning Foundation, which used to be the Self-Design Graduate Institute, which I helped found many years ago. So
Wow.
yeah, adult education with a lot of elbow room to be very creative, which is awesome.
Very
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
So a lot there to unpack because it's just so much. What of that right now? Because you just, again, looking at your resume, there's just so much and it's so wonderful. And I don't want to use the word intimidating, but there's just so much that you've done. What what lately is your heart pulling you towards?
Hmm.
And what are you most excited about that you're doing right now?
Well, what I'm most excited about is also the hardest thing in my life.
Okay.
So both things, facing my own inner shadowlands, in a way that it's like, wow, that's surprising. That's surprising.
Yep.
Yeah. So I'm dealing with some physical symptoms that can be limiting at times. Um, yeah. So that has caused me to really go deep. And
Mhm.
the focus of my PhD research is listening, deep listening, as a
Wow.
way to support health and well-being. So that also includes inner listening. So this whole path of how can I, right at this point in my life when I'm just coming 65, so many things are ripening, that I can offer to the world because I hope they're
Hmm.
helpful things, especially in this time. And I'm
Hmm.
having to my own limitations and my own, shaky voice or shaky arm or difficulty walking or, yeah, which are all kind of trauma based symptoms. So my voice too at times. So how to keep moving and staying connected with myself as a human being who has things to learn and give and heal, while I'm involved. So for example, in a few hours, I'll be hosting an online mentoring session with a Waldorf school
Very
that I
cool.
that I've done some face-to-face work with, and it's really rich.
Hmm.
Because they've seen me, they know I'm dealing with certain movement incapacities at certain times, and to still show up. So it seems like showing up even though and along with
Mm.
feels really important, even though and along with however we are. And what used to be a place of shame becomes a place of vulnerability and strength.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's so much good stuff there, and good as in message. I mean, obviously going through anything, any challenges can be really difficult, but it sounds like that's, one a low moment, or at least could have been a low moment that you're starting to work through and move through. And I find sometimes in life we can have these and it incapacitates us, and it
Yeah.
puts us in a place of fear, puts us in a place of not wanting to move or change. But you just said it there, and it's so wonderful, is that it's not gone.
Mhm.
It's how do I move with this?
How do I move with, and how do I also use poetry a lot. I mean, poetry
Mm.
comes in poetry. And that's actually my data collection method for my PhD is,
Oh, cool.
yeah, yeah, as inspirations for the future, I hope. Um, but out of that, I could say one of my poems came to mind, or I don't consider them mine, they just come through. But at the heart of the poem, it's like, because I still meet moments of absolute despair, and when I absolutely feel like I have to give up, I can't go on, and I
Hmm.
sink. And then when I sink low and hit bottom, then I have to push up again. And every time I push up, I'm building strength and resiliency.
Yeah.
So those low moments are not to be avoided,
Hmm.
right? But actually tuck in and don't deny, like, it's like, this feels bad. I feel bad in this way. And not to make it bigger and not to celebrate it, but not to deny it.
Right. That's so good. And you know what? Maybe for some context, do you want to just take a couple minutes and describe like what changes physically happened for you and what it looked like before and now, just so we can kind of get the idea. I mean, you can talk about a bit like just in terms of the physical like movement
Yeah.
and your voice, but maybe just to put not to put a name on it, but essentially just to be like, hey, this is what happened and how you're able to move through that now.
Sure. Well, and it's doing this dance of what language are you using? So in the
Mm,
language of Western medicine, it looks like Parkinson's,
okay.
right? In
Yep.
the language of Chinese medicine, it looks like trauma response.
Oh,
In the language of
huh,
somatic awareness, it looks like a healing crisis.
huh.
In anthroposophical medicine, which is Western medicine carried further into body, soul, and spirit, it looks like I have to work on these joining parts between my physical and energy bodies.
Wow.
So it's soul work. Like, which lens do you want to look through? So it's the weakening voice, shaky left arm,
Yeah.
lack of strength at times, lack of coordination. Now, that being said, I just spent, an hour before meeting with you in my sister's gym working out.
Awesome. I
Yeah,
love that. And
yeah.
it's so, I mean, because again, I come from the fitness background for so long, and there's so much to be said there for anybody with any sort of challenges like that. It's not, like you said before, it's not denying it. It's not making it bigger than it is or smaller than it is. But it's like, this is,
Hmm.
and now what?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And I want to touch on it. Like you said, some of those, it depends on what lens you look at it. And I thought that was interesting. And you mentioned the, in Western medicine, you call it Parkinson's, but in other, in Chinese medicine, you'd call it healing the trauma body.
Right.
So do you maybe want to dive into that a little bit or elaborate on what that looks like maybe for you, or better yet, how many times you might have seen something like this in other people, and if you've ever seen them move through it in a different method other than traditional Western medicine.
Right. Let me just take a moment. I feel like as human beings, we're always leaning towards healing.
Yeah.
It's part of our walk towards wholeness and awakening to who we are and who
Hmm.
we are in relationship to ourselves, each other, the earth, all things. So on that walk, yeah, there's so many ways to understand what's going on, right? So many ways. So I have a friend you know, and I feel it. Yeah, so many things could be said as you said. I have a friend who was a little more elderly than me and
Mhm.
diagnosed with Parkinson's a few years ago and chose to try this medication,
Mhm.
which worked for a minute and then doesn't work.
Mhm.
And then out of the Chinese medicine stream of thinking, once you've used that medicine, you can't heal naturally anymore because you've messed up your system.
Oh,
Now I don't know
wow.
if that's true. I don't know if it's that definitive.
Right.
Um, But I also know a woman that I met early on when we moved to the Kootenays who was living with MS, multiple sclerosis, for many years and decided that she had had enough and started on a program of diet, fitness, meditation, inner awareness. And within two and a half years, she had cured her MS and it hasn't come back since.
Wow.
So, and that's every
Wow.
individual story, everybody's story is very individual,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
How long it takes, what the learning is.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it just makes me think of, again, being from the fitness background, how many times I've had clients that I trained for so long and you'd think, okay, after training for 2 or 3 years with a professional and you like these results would just be showing,
Yeah.
but it makes you think how much of that was, and I've talked this before, but how much of that was mental and psychological and them having trauma there or something that was holding them back,
Yeah.
probably not even aware of it, truly. And then on the other side, you have some, had people where they've made such big changes in such short time. And I'm like, how did you do this? And they're like, well, I just believed I could. And it was just like,
Right.
it was no, it was just so certain. And
Yeah.
it reminded me of that lady that you just talked about, that it was just certain that she was going to get better.
Right.
And it's
Yeah.
like when the body or when the body agrees or your mind says, hey, this is what we're doing, and the body agrees, and you have that alignment, it's like, oh, this is what it is. So
Right.
it makes me think, what are some things you're doing now? Because, one of the things you caught earlier there, and I don't know what modality it was, but, disconnection you mentioned between the body and mind, and there's something not aligned there. What are things that you do to feel aligned and to feel whole within yourself?
The big question.
Yeah.
The first piece is the noticing. And I would say in my biography in this lifetime, so I work with the concept of reincarnation, just so you know.
Mm, very cool.
Yeah. So in this lifetime, in this body, I have been a very resilient, fit, um, able, coordinated, kind of get her done kind of person. So
Hmm.
typically, and very fast healing usually. So
Hmm.
this has been a really different experience for me.
Right.
Really different experience. So things aren't always as simple as we may think, like, oh, just align your body, mind, spirit, and things will be well.
Hmm.
It's not so simple. So there's a kind of excavating, I feel like my soul wants me to be doing,
Hmm.
and so, and I, as you said earlier, there's many things just below the surface of my consciousness. And that's true for all of us, things that we
Yep.
just don't quite see, like our blind spots. And
Yep.
sometimes other people can see them or catch a shadow of it, but we don't.
Yep.
So actually noticing that in my body through scanning, inner scanning, meditation practices, but inner scanning, checking in.
Right.
Oh, why do I feel uneasy? Do you know what I mean? Why do I feel a little off center? And just taking the time to do some excavation, some research, and then paying attention to what pops to mind.
I I absolutely love that. Well, one, because meditation is such a big practice for myself and something I always, anybody I'm helping and coaching, they know I talk about it all the time. But I like what you said, and I think it's another way to take it a little bit deeper is the excavating. So the
Yeah.
idea of like, I'm just going to go a little bit beyond these surface popcorn thoughts, because we all have them where they're flying back and forth about God knows what sometimes. But to be able to dig a little bit past that, and then like you said, noticing,
Yeah.
right? And noticing what thoughts, and hopefully I'm saying this right. Like, so if you're having, so hypothetically, if I'm having a pain shoulder, let's just say, because you can see it, when I meditate on it, when I scan that, when I'm closing my eyes and I'm thinking about it, what thoughts come up with it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So working out today, for example, we were doing side lunges,
Mhm.
and I know that I was having this uncomfortable feeling. I felt uneasy in my body, like, why? This is a really simple exercise. And then when I asked my body, what is this about? What came up was these early memories in school, because I had a dyslexic experience of not knowing what was right and what was left.
Okay. Yeah. I still have to do this all the time.
Yeah, well, that doesn't even work for
Oh no.
yeah. So the terror of being in the classroom and the teacher saying, lift your right hand, and having to scan the room to see what other people are doing.
Hmm.
That memory came up. So then it's like consoling.
Oh,
I mean, it's like, oh, who would have thought that was connected to doing side lunges, right?
yeah.
Who would have
Nobody.
thought? Nobody. So then I have to just like console myself and say, that's okay, little
Yeah.
one. See that that was hard, you know,
Yeah.
and 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 recenter and ground and let it flow. And it's almost like the awareness itself is the healing balm.
Yeah. That's really cool. And you know what? It's funny. It reminds me, years back, different life. It felt like, and again, when I was training full time, I was in a bad spot with my past relationship. And I remember the one day I was working out and I was squatting and the weight wasn't relevant. It was a pretty relatively lightweight for me at the time. But I remember doing it and I remember I had one where I went and I felt something in my back. And I went, oh, whatever. I'll ignore it. It'll be fine. I did another set. And it wasn't a massive amount of weight for myself, but and I did another set and boop, I felt something go and I went, oh my God, I gotta rack this. And I ended
Yeah.
up herniating a disc.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah, and it was bad. Like I remember I couldn't like touch my toe. Like I couldn't do nothing for a while. And I knew how, thankfully, being post rehab, I knew how to stretch and do all these things to help immediately and to recover quickly. But it was interesting when I looked into it and I looked into like again, it was a mechanical thing there. However, the emotions that I was feeling at that time, and I look back at it, and when I started researching into it, into researching into trauma in the body and the emotions that come up and where these things can be triggered, was instability, emotional instability.
Yeah.
And at that time, it was very emotionally unstable.
Yeah.
And in a relationship where there was no grounding at all.
Yeah.
And so I was went, huh, after I'm like, oh, okay, right. Who knew that I wouldn't have thought that connected, but it was a very real, like, here this happened and then this was going on and there we go. So, so yeah, anybody that is, because I always like to try to bring people like yourself that is just so deep into that world. For you, the language you use is just normal, but for somebody on the outside, they're looking at you going, huh? So how can we take that now to somebody, to general population, say, this is what it looks like. This is
Hmm.
what, like you mentioned, you're doing a side lunge and something just feels weird and you pay attention and you're like, oh, this weird memory popped up. That's a really perfect, in my opinion, example of anybody being able to utilize that
You're right.
and do something with it and be able to
Hmm.
help them, which is so, so wonderful. So thank you
Yeah.
for that. That's such a great little tool.
Wonderful. Yay.
So I was going to ask you again, looking at what you've done is just a couple things I noticed is one, it's all about creativity. It seems to be a very common theme. I mean, look at the painting, wonderful painting in the background and education. And then it's continual. Like you've been doing this for a very long time, which I think is so fascinating. But what started you initially down that path?
I think I was 9 years old, and between 7 and 9, and my mom and dad bought a set of encyclopedias, and with it came books of the Greek myths.
Ooh, I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I read them all. I like ate them, and I thought, finally, yes. And then I realized I want to understand everything,
Okay.
right? I want to understand everything. I looked at the TV and thought, I don't understand how that works, but somebody does because they helped create it. Like
Yeah.
everything, I realized that everything around us that's not of nature is human made, and it
Mm,
it started with ideas. So that
mm.
really. set me off. And then a deep, deep curiosity and love for people.
Hmm.
Yeah, deep curiosity and love for people. So yeah, and I had experiences that I think aren't as uncommon as we think.
Hmm.
We just don't talk about them. Experiences of um, seeing things that other people couldn't see when I was a child, and
Whoa.
when I was 12, having people who had passed on kind of visit. So I had experiences that let me
Whoa.
know, we're not by ourselves, and that there's a spiritual world, or a different, that we're part of a larger connected reality.
Hmm.
So I want
Absolutely.
to understand that too.
Oh, I love that. That's so, well, there's a lot there, but really, I think the big one that stood with me is just the curiosity of other people.
Yeah,
And it's seeming to me now, the more I do this, is people that just start to excel so quickly are curious about other people and are curious in general, just ask questions and want to learn and continue to grow,
right.
right, as you've done, which is so amazing.
Well, I was lucky, I went from high school. There was a moment when I was deciding if I would go into law, because I really wanted to help support people and their rights,
Mm,
or would I go into youth work and counseling? And I had a chat with one of my aunts, actually, and she was working at a bank. She was the only professional woman I knew at that time.
mm.
And she said, you know what? It's so hard for women in the professional life. Don't go into law. You'll just get ripped apart. This was in the late 70s,
Yeah, right.
and I'm glad. So I made a shift and went to Grant MacEwan College in
Yeah.
a fairly new avant-garde program um, on called Youth Development. So an intensive 2-year program, really focused on knowing yourself, understanding family systems,
Mm,
learning how to listen deeply, learning
right.
how to count. Yeah, really learning about human development. It's where I met Waldorf education and the work of Rudolf Steiner,
Wow.
and called Eurythmy, which I've also trained in. Um, yeah, so lots happened in that. So lots got satiated there. I mean, I met Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, in high school. And if you don't know who he is, definitely look him up, Viktor Frankl.
Okay, well, I actually don't know who he is.
Yeah, I'll send you a little link of
Do,
him
do you have a quick
giving.
rundown of who he is, like a 30-second snip of who he would
He
be?
created the logos theory,
He's the
and
what?
he created the logos theory. He was the psychiatrist who was in Auschwitz,
Oh,
and he lived, and he watched and noticed who lived and who didn't, and he realized it had nothing to do with how much food. It had to do with um, kindness and interest in others,
wow,
right? So he created
wow.
a beautiful. So his the book that I read in grade 11 is called Man's Search for Meaning.
Very cool. So just to pack that down into a mouthful, this just for myself. So this psychologist was in Auschwitz, and he said the people that lived the longest, it was because they were kind and they were curious about others. Is that what you said?
Well, the
Or that
kindness, I would say kindness that took action. So they would
Mm,
share their piece of bread,
right.
right?
Wow.
Yeah.
And it makes you think that again, even doing it for selfish reasons, let's just say, but to have that kind of kindness, if you want to live a long life, there's something to it to give back. There's something to it to share and give and live for others. I've heard it said life isn't about me, it's about we.
Uh-huh.
So
Well,
how can you give?
and the notion that I want to touch back on the notion that it can be selfish, because it really can't.
Right, that's a good point.
It really can't. Um, the other person I met in college was Carl Rogers, one of the first humanistic psychologists. And the thing that stuck
Wow.
with me for these many years is we're each other's medicine.
Hmm.
We're each other's medicine. So he also ignited in me this deep love of listening to the other,
Yeah.
because that's what he did. He listened. He just, his presence was healing because he attended the human being.
Hmm.
His thing was we each have what we need to heal inside of us. And then his daughter, Natalie Rogers, took his work in humanistic psychology and counseling into expressive arts. So I did my expressive arts training with Natalie Rogers, Carl Rogers' daughter, which
Wow.
was absolutely amazing. Yeah.
That's fascinating. You know, and I really, that really resonates with me, what you said. Our medicine is others.
Uh-huh.
And I think right now, more than ever, is we need each other.
We do.
And, you know, for so many reasons of why, but really it's, I think a big part of that too, and is one, recognizing we need each other. And I think the thing that stops people from that is the ego,
Hmm.
is not having vulnerability and not having some humility. And that's something I did notice about you, and which is so fascinating because, again, especially after it's even more fascinating after reading all the things you've done and telling me all these stuff you've experienced. But anytime we've had conversations in the past, I'm always blown away at your listening ability and your curiosity and your questions and how, yeah, just attentive you are to that. Even though the topic we're talking about in my head now, I'm like probably sound like a kindergarten kid talking to you compared to this.
Not at all. Not at all.
But it just, but you know what I mean? It just, it kind of, now I'm like, okay, right. Like this is something this is your world. So it's so interesting. But it goes to show you how valuable that is,
Mm.
right? And how even then you can still learn something from others. And that's a message that I've been trying to talk in here a lot is we can all learn from each other,
Always.
right?
Always.
So I guess my question to you is then what are some things you do, and maybe I've already answered, but hopefully, what are some things that you do to put you in a good headspace to be able to learn from others and learn from certain situations?
Having moments of inner quiet, feeling the earth beneath my feet
Hmm,
and know that I've got ancestral spirits around me supporting me,
hmm,
that supports me and that there's cosmic purpose going on
hmm.
and that that's true for everybody,
Yeah.
that we're each little miracles, yeah. So this deep, yeah, a deep love.
Hmm,
And I mean, not a sentimental love, you know, because I know when I've been attended to, it's been helpful to me.
hmm.
I know that when I attend you, it's helpful to you.
Yeah.
Part of my master's research, which these things that I do, I feel called to do them because they help open doors for other things to happen.
Hmm.
So my master's research was focused on the connection of the heart to learning,
Okay.
the heart to learning, and I looked through 5 different lenses: Chinese medicine, anthroposophical medicine, First Nations understandings, Western medicine. Gosh, did I say only 4? And what's the 5th? Chinese medicine.
I think you said that, but
Oh,
either way,
there's
that's
one.
still a lot.
It was a lot. Now, why did I just remember that? Oh, because in that I met, now I'm going to forget the name, but he was a TED Prize winner, TED Talk Prize winner many years ago for his whole school in the hole of the wall or something. Oh, it was the fellow from India. And I'm sorry, I can't remember his name.
Well, so,
But let me tell you what I learned from him.
yeah, absolutely.
So he was doing research. Um, and what he did was he took a computer and he stuck it in the middle of uh, a rural small village in India. No instructions, right? And just the children would come and he watched them, what they learned how to do and how quickly they learned how to do it.
Hmm.
So he noticed that. And then he asked elders in the community to just come and stand by them and say, "Oh, that's good. Wow, look what you're doing. Oh, aren't you clever?" And the learning exponentially grew. So when we're witnessed with love, when we are witnessed with love, not given instruction, but just witness,
Huh.
our whole neural pathways open up.
Wow. You know, that really, yeah, you said that. It just kind of opens up this like realm of I'm a parent, you're a parent, I have 2 kids. give 3. And it just makes you wonder, like, wow, if you want, we always want what's best for, or we want our kids to just thrive.
Yeah.
It makes you think of, yeah, having learning, just, not learning disabilities, I like that word, but just let's say there's just certain things they're struggling with and they can't
Mhm.
figure it out. It's like, right, here's an easy tool to just
Yeah.
observe and be like, wow, you're really smart. And wow, like you just said, and just observe and just encourage, even if it's something little, and just pay attention.
Yes.
And then it makes me wonder of people, on the coaching side or as an educator, how often being you're told you're wrong and
Yeah.
being told that's not the way. And I do understand there's, a cooking class and the kid's waving around a knife. It's like, okay, that's super dangerous. We probably shouldn't do that. But, but aside from things that are going to physically harm people immediately or themselves immediately, it's like, how can we as a society just change that? Change
Hmm.
the way we observe other people, change the way we observe how they do things, and into a supportive way, right? In a way that
Right.
helps them grow and learn.
Right.
So that's a really like, yeah, that's quite the nugget there. And again, it makes me think as I coach football, it's like, okay, how can I use that with coaching kids in football? How can I use that with coaching basketball? Now, how can I help that? How can I help use that in helping people in their business or in relationships?
Right. Right.
Right. And it's just, I think the idea of just instead of judging, it's just
Hmm.
holding space and just being like,
Well,
oh, okay, cool. Like, look what you're doing.
well, holding space and having agreements. Oh, there's so much in this, Nathaniel. Um, Having agreements so that if my role is um, if my role is grandma and I'm witnessing, I'm there with an open heart, open mind, and I'm
Mhm.
just loving what's happening. If my
Mhm.
role is as an educator or a coach or a mentor,
Mhm.
there's an agreement about my what role I'm holding in this space, and then I work with agreements. So I make
Mhm.
common agreements with the group or with the person.
Right.
So I'll be on time, I'll be respectful, I'll tell the truth, I'll be vulnerable, I'll be authentic, you know, and
Mhm.
I will ask before I give critical feedback, right?
Yeah.
So to ask because,
Yep.
or anything corrective,
Yeah.
that's part of the agreement, that's part of my role. It's not personal and it's not
Yep.
a judge.
Yeah. I can see that. And I know I've jumped to that. I know a lot of people do, but I think, right, if you can put on that hat or that lens of, hey, let's just see what they're thinking. Because I know there's been a few times where I've done that with, coaching a sport or even anybody. And I know there's been a few times where I was surprised by the answer. Because in my head, I'm like, well, that's your ego goes, well, that's stupid. But then you listen to the answer, you're like, oh, like, huh, I get why you would come to that conclusion. And that's actually reasonable. It's not ideal at this scenario, but it's a reasonable answer. So you even learned something there.
Well, and that there's wisdom that can be unpacked
Yep.
through agreement in a space, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm working with a group at a local business now where they're wanting in the production part of the business, they're wanting the workers, the full-time workers, to be like a mastermind group.
Oh,
That awesome that they are there to hear and encourage and help each other grow and
yep.
help grow that part of the business into a more balanced, holistic, nourishing gesture.
Absolutely. And it goes back to what you said before, is it our medicine, the medicine we need is others.
Exactly.
And I have a mastermind I'm a part of now, and I find it wonderful. And it's especially because I'm trying to pull people in that are just different, that have the same, I would say energy, but the same drive or the same desire for more growth, change. Like there's certain things that, again, a good example, if you have somebody that's very pessimistic over everything and very negative, it makes it very difficult to have discussions. But from different backgrounds and different ideas, and doesn't mean that, like my one friend, he's great at picking out, hey, well, here's these things, and not in a pessimistic way, but in a questioning way, in a way of like, have you looked at this? This is an actual thing that could come up. Have you looked at this? And, I always think if he can't poke holes in it, well, then it's good. It must be
Well,
good because he's so good at that. Right. But it's just using each other. And it's,
And
go ahead.
sorry, you go
Um,
ahead.
no, I was just going to say it's using each other and it's understanding that we all have strengths. We do. And my strength is different than your strength. And your weaknesses are different from my weaknesses. And sometimes your weakness is my strength and your strength is my weakness. Sometimes it's not. But if we can, that's, I think, the idea of the mastermind there. And it's so wonderful in a business is that you get to hear everybody's strengths and you get to hear these things come up like, oh, that's actually something they're really good at and passionate and excited about. So why not put them there?
Mhm.
Right. So I think that's so wonderful that you're doing that.
Well, and it opens the space for them to catch each other doing the best thing,
Yes.
right? And to encourage each other
Yep.
for improvement out of reaching the goal that they've created together,
Yep.
and that it's not imposed. That's another important one for me, that it's not imposed, but it's self-generated.
Yeah. Yep. I would agree with you. And, even something just from experiencing my own mastermind is even a few of the other guys said it. It was like, it was funny because we met the one time. And then when I met again, I was like, I got to like take action. And I was like, well, why do you say? Because I was going to meet with you in a week or 2 weeks. Like, I don't want to come doing saying the same thing I said last week. And it was like, and kind of in a fun though, like, right. And it was good because it sparked something wonderful and they took action and were able to create something. And now we can talk about it. And now we can refine it and build from each other. So I want to maybe change gears a little bit here. I got a question for you. So when you think of the term emotional fitness, what does that mean to you? And what are things you do to be able to handle life's crazy roller coaster of emotions that we experience?
Hmm. Well, there's a number of practices that I've had for a long time that need to be continual practices,
Yeah.
which are noticing my own thinking, noticing my own feelings.
Mm,
That noticing is a first step, and practicing non-judgment for myself and others,
mm,
looking for the positive. So all of these relate to how I'm going to emotionally respond in a moment, right?
right.
Yeah, and staying open to possibilities. If somebody says something and I think, how can that be true? Staying open, so staying emotionally available to them and to myself, right?
No,
Yeah.
that makes perfect sense.
And in the big ups and downs, you know, not denying, like feeling, because feelings want to move, right? A
Right.
feeling is something in motion, emotion, right?
Mm,
So they want to move. So noticing, and then let it move, and getting the awareness and letting it move through.
huh. You know what?
You
You
know,
said something I've heard it before, but it's never really resonated. But you just said it as emotion is motion. Right? Do you want to say that? Just reiterate that again, because I think it's so critical and needed.
feelings are things in motion, like emotion.
Mm,
Right? They want to move. When they get stuck is when they do, it can be harmful. And when they get stuck and grow bigger, then I need to really pay attention. Because
right.
when I get triggered on the outside, it's an inside thing I'm not seeing.
Mm,
There's no doubt about it in my mind and in my experience. Like if my longtime husband is bugging me, what quality am I not seeing in myself? Like what is unresolved in me?
yeah, that
Which
makes
doesn't,
sense.
so I need to own, which doesn't mean I won't have a conversation with him, but it won't be blaming. It'll be curious.
Yeah, that's so good. And I think you said it there. Well, there's a lot you said there that was so good, but I think something I just want to touch on is the blaming,
Yeah.
right? Because it's really easy to experience an emotion and then blame. A good example I use is like driving in traffic. And if somebody cuts you off, you have two options. You can freak out and slam your horn and flip the bird and whatever, all that. Or you can just go, oh, well, they must be in a hurry, or they might
Right.
not have seen me.
Yeah.
And it's your choice, right? And there's something else that you said, and it ties back to the stuff before the very beginning, was that if the emotions aren't able to pass through, they get stuck.
Yeah.
And then that kind of ties back to what we were talking about before, is that popping up physically. and
Yeah.
manifesting itself physically, and how certain areas of the body will respond to that. Like you said, you're doing side lunges and you have these emotions, and this memory came up, and I was like, right, this hasn't passed. I wasn't able to work through that. So it makes me think of how many people that I know and that you probably know and that are out there that are having these chronic things come up. Neck
Mm.
pain, back pain, shoulder pain, you name it, digestion issues. Um, a quick story for myself. I remember before I split with my ex and got out of that relationship, I was having terrible digestion issues, terrible. And I thought in my head, I'm like, oh, and I've always had good gut. And I thought it was dairy and FODMAPs. And I thought, oh, all these things, I'm going to try all this elimination diet, it's going to work. And it still wasn't any better. But it wasn't until I started doing therapy and started doing somatic theory and got my nervous system to just relax and be able to work through some of these emotions that all of a sudden it was like, oh, it's gone. It's
Oh,
like, oh, huh, who knew?
awesome.
So I guess my question for you then is, well, again, touching back, the noticing part, I think is huge. Non-judgment, that's so big. And I think we all need more of that. When you think of emotions that people don't process, or in your experience helping people, what are some common things you've seen, or is there any commonalities or popular things you've seen with emotions that are not processed, and how that shows up physically, or is that show, or where you've seen that show up physically?
Mm. I think it's so individual. I think it's so individual. I really do. I think it's so individual. I mean, I think we have lots of work to do around shame.
Okay.
Lots of
So
work.
not to interrupt you, but on shame, again, you have to tell names obviously, but just do you know anybody that's had experience with that, and where do they notice that physically when it comes to shame, or where did that person notice it?
I'm thinking of someone, and this is fairly recent, just a blaring headache.
Okay.
A blaring headache. For that person, that's how that showed up, right?
Wow.
For somebody else, it might be an ache in the lower back, like it,
Yep. Right. That's so interesting because I've read, might have been, actually, I don't know where I found it, but either way, it was like, oh, this area, neck and shoulders, it's stress, and stress is general, but sorry, if it's digestion tract, it had to do with worthiness. And if it's, your reproductive organs, worthiness and self-love. If it's neck and shoulders, it's burden. So I went, huh, like I wonder how often that happens, or is those just what that person noticed?
Louise Hay has done some beautiful work, and I don't know if she's still walking the planet, but yeah, her book Heal Your Body links emotions to illnesses and parts of the body in the way that you're describing. So I
Right.
used it many years as a kind of insight tool, which was helpful. And it's true, except for when it's not,
That's
It most
the tough part.
well, you have to ask yourself, right? Is it true for me?
Mm.
And I guess that's that inner listening, how
Oh,
to
yeah.
keep developing that subtle inner ear, because we know in our heart and in our gut what's true and what's not true for us,
Yeah,
right? Yeah, yeah.
absolutely. And
So,
so you were saying that to be able to listen to that, because again, I want to be able to break this down a little bit into, call it a self step-by-step guide, if you will, um, to be able to do that. And so you say you take time for yourself, right? You
mhm.
take time to meditate. Is there any other practice that you do, or when you are meditating, what does that specifically look like, or are you doing guided? Is it non-guided? Or do you do, like you said, you do a bit of a body scan,
Mhm. Oh, there's a whole bunch of different things I do, and I think people have to find their way to it.
right?
But I guide myself, and there's a few different techniques I use, and prayers and mantras that I've learned over the years. But I think there's some really beautiful stuff around out there. And it's kind of noticing what you're drawn to that's important.
Right.
Noticing what you're drawn to, you know? So if people can just even sit quiet for a couple of minutes a day. Like yesterday, I noticed, oh my God, I'm so triggered. I feel so cranky. The cranky. So I just took myself to my room and shut the door and just sat on the and just sat. and just was with myself. Like, what
Yeah.
is it? What is it? What's needed? What's going on?
Mm.
I don't necessarily get instantaneous answers, but the answer will come because I've opened the space. Yeah. So for me, meditation is how I start my day. It's
Mm.
in the middle of the day, it's at night before I go to sleep, you know, and I do
Yeah.
some somatic practices of body scanning and brain spotting. If you've heard of brain spotting, people may
No,
have
do you
heard.
want to elaborate on that? Because I've never heard of that.
Well, I don't want to say much because I'm not an expert, but what I can tell you what I do.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's that basic sit, comfortable, feel your body from the, you know, from your toes to your feet to your ankles. Be as specific as you can in steps, you know, shins, calves, knees, go up the whole body, um, into the hips, all the way up until you're at your head. So, so I'm not going to do it because I don't want to put people into a trance. Uh,
Everybody's like,
so feel your head, including your skull and your skin and your eyes and nose and all of it. Feel the whole body and notice where. Just notice without judgment, right? Notice where anything is not showing up or where things hurt or are tight. Just noticing, and then you open your eyes, and wherever your eyes go to, you just look and allow yourself to feel a sense of um, wellness and wholeness.
hmm.
Wellness and wholeness. Yeah, and this is a really inadequate description of brain spotting, but you actually sit and stare at that spot, and it's actually doing some neural repair in deep brain.
Hmm.
So you sit and look with a soft gaze for 2 or 3 minutes, and then come back to the body.
Very cool. You know, it reminds me of a lot of stuff that Joe Dispenza does. Dr.
Yeah,
Joe Dispenza. It reminds me of stuff my high school coach actually used to put us through when we had played football, and it was like a bit of a body scan, and then we would meditate. And then we would go into a visualization
yeah,
and utilize that visualization. It was guided to, football and making plays and doing all that. But it's even just to touch on that, very powerful. If you haven't done it yet, and listening hasn't done it, do it. Visualizing things you want, or just watching like a movie. But I really like what you said with the scanning, especially if you're noticing something,
hmm,
right? If you're like, hey, I'm irritated, why? I'm frustrated this, why? Because I find when we don't do that, that's when we go after our partner for whatever reason. We attack,
hmm,
we verbally, or we'll be upset because they did this. And really, it's actually, I'm upset about something else.
right.
Or we emotionally dump on a coworker or kids or something that really didn't have anything to do with them.
Hmm,
But
hmm. Yeah,
it's an easy way. And I always say, if you don't have, I mean, I know people with time and lives are busy, but a really quick hack, if you don't have time, pull out your phone and look at your screen time. If it's over an hour, you got
you've
time.
got,
Like you truly do. And to take 5 or 10 minutes to fill up your own cup.
yeah,
If you can't do that, well then what? Like, what are you doing?
right.
Because it's only 5 minutes sometimes.
Exactly, and it can be very brief. There's a beautiful practice also, I've known for many years and I use often, called Ho'oponopono. I don't know if
We
you've heard
talked
it.
about that one. Yes, I love that one.
Beautiful. So that's useful because we can also harm ourselves, right, with self-judgment,
Yep.
right? Self-judgment.
Do you
You
want to
know,
do
so
just what's a quick recap on it again?
no, it's like it's really picturing the person in the situation, and I do it for myself too, and I say, I'm sorry, and really feel it. I'm sorry. Forgive me.
Mhm.
Thank you. I love you. Yeah.
And it's simple, and again, I think about emotional fitness. I think about being able to handle when life throws those things at you. That's such a really great and easy tool
Yeah.
to be able to just stop. Even if you're at work and I, maybe you can't stop and go to your room but you can go to the washroom for 10 minutes or for 5 minutes or go for a minute or 2 minutes and go to the washroom or step away and look at yourself in the mirror and do something like that to just
Exactly.
calm down. Maybe you're freaking out about something you don't need to be freaking out. Maybe you got upset about something you might not have needed to, or maybe you're just feeling anxious and you're like, well, why? You can go
Right.
through that process.
And maybe something happened that is just upsetting because things do
Yeah.
happen. Right. Another tool I've used for a long time and was part of my master's research through the heart math work, the Heart Math Center,
Mm.
is a really simple tool called coherence.
Okay.
And I can teach you that in
Yeah,
30 seconds. 30
I love
seconds.
it.
Yeah. So with your consciousness, notice the space around your physical heart with your consciousness and
Okay.
just breathe into that space around your heart. Just normal breaths. Now, in your inner imagination, picture a place, a somebody, an occasion that you feel love and gratitude for.
Mm.
Could be a person, could be a pet, could be a scene from nature. Just picture it and breathe in and out of that heart space. Just 4 regular breaths. And that's simple. You're in coherence, your respiration and your heartbeat
Mm.
in good relationship.
Yeah. And it's funny, I not that I was like stressed before, but you can feel it. And I think it's like anything, it's how you do it.
Yeah,
It's like exercising. If you show up to the gym and you're staring at your phone and you're whatever, you're not going to get much results from it,
exactly.
right? But if you truly just want some change,
Mm,
and again, this goes to any tool, any practice, any ritual that you do, whatever you want to call it, daily habit, success habit, I call them. It's like the more you put into it, the more you get out.
mhm.
You can't show up to a football practice, half your gear on, barely try and expect to get better. You're not.
Mhm.
So, all these little habits that take that few minutes and just really like do your absolute best. Just be present and do that. And yeah, and see what happens. Be curious. Who knows? Right? A really good example I like to give with that is, you know, I've seen it before. People have commented before about how, well, like, oh, okay, well, gratitude doesn't fix anything. It's like, you're right. Like, it doesn't change, let's say you need money. It doesn't change now. It doesn't change this immediate fact you have no money in your bank account, hypothetically. But when you do stuff like that, you're prepping your brain and your heart for something different than how you're currently feeling.
Mhm.
So what it does do is it opens you up to opportunities or things that can be different.
Mhm.
A good example is having conversations when I work in the fitness industry. I'd be at the gym all the time, and I don't know how many times I got new clients just from being there and just talking to people and having just real honest conversations with them about whatever. No intentions, just being kind and just being like, hey, how you doing? Blah, blah. And we talk about whatever. And then eventually they would go, oh, okay. And we'd lead the conversation towards training. Point is that if I was in a headspace, heart space, energy, whatever you want to call it, or just a headspace of negativity or pessimistic or scarcity, I wouldn't have been able to do that. And that happens a lot. And that's just like a little example. Think about job opportunities. Think about, meeting a partner or meeting a potential partner. If you're going around with a big, I'm going to overkill, but if you've got a big frown on your face and you're hunched over, it's not a super attractive look. And people aren't, like, well, I can't find anybody. And you walk around like this all the time. But if you're, it's like maybe if you smile and just look at people, maybe it might be different. It could be different because what
Yeah.
you're doing right now clearly isn't working. So why not try it?
Well, and in so many ways, we're more space than we are matter, right?
Yep.
Particle and wave. So we're beings in motion. We're more space than matter. So when I know when I open up and am more expansive in my feeling life
Hmm.
and my experiencing and my thinking, more synchronicities happen. I notice more.
Yeah.
More things are attracted to me,
Mhm.
either because I notice them or just because they are, because my field is open and welcoming.
Mhm. Absolutely. And again, another good example of this is I call it like the smile test. Walk in a mall, store, anywhere with people and just smile at them, but like give them like a real, like, not just like like actually smile at them and nod or something. And then they'll smile back. And then what can happen is then they'll smile back to you, but then someone else will see them smiling, they'll smile at them, and then all of a sudden they're smiling at somebody else, and you get this like, chain effect of everybody smiling, and all of a sudden the energy just kind of shifts a little bit. right? And again, I've been worked in gyms a lot, so you can see that time and time again where all of a sudden, hey, everybody's all of a sudden like, why is everybody all of a sudden in a good mood? Like nothing really changed, but all of a sudden everybody's smiling. So, even if you're not someone that is energy and all that, and I get it, I was there. But even on that, in a very simple scale, you can see how smiling at someone turns to someone else, gets smiling at you, turn to them smiling at somebody else who might have been having a bad day, who sees people smiling, and they go, "Well, you can't naturally you want to smile now."
Right.
So you can just change that and just go, "Oh, you know what? Maybe things aren't so bad, and maybe this." So just allowing for that possibility.
Hmm.
So I have no that's super. Like you said, there's a lot of really good stuff there. Um, what is one thing right now that you're working on that is because we're going to wrap it up here in a bit, but that you're super passionate about and you're excited about and that you want to share with others? And then what's one, if you had one or two lessons for the world, what would it be? I know it's a big one. So maybe let's start with the exciting or just things that you're working on right now that are just really cool and interesting and that you're really finding you're excited about.
So many things. What am I going to pick? I think the work that I'm doing with a group of colleagues around bringing a very human approach to diversity, equity, and inclusion work.
Mm-hmm.
So really bringing a deepening, a kind of approach that opens the space and promotes human beings to connect with one another,
Mm-hmm.
um, to put down their guard, to be curious, to learn together, to have inspirations about how to heal and deal with some of the difficult things from the past that are still going on. So
Mm-hmm.
that feels exciting to take an approach that isn't as critical and is more human.
Yeah.
That feels good.
So when you say
Yeah.
more human, what would be like, what would that look like to somebody from the outside looking in?
Mhm. It would include the arts, including
Okay.
the art of conversation. So it's not about
Oh,
theories being promoted, but it's about moving together, painting together, singing together,
oh,
having hard conversations for sure, but held in a context of care and
yeah.
vulnerability. Yeah.
I really like that, and I definitely agree that that's missing. Um, and that having that, like you said before, that curiosity.
Yeah.
And again, and this is something that I'm working on and noticed is that you can breach almost any discussion
Hmm.
with almost anybody if you're just genuinely curious.
Absolutely.
And you could pick any hot topic you want to go down right now. There's so many of them, but and I say it because I've done it a few different times, and every time I'm just with the approach of, hey, I'm like really curious because I have no idea how this works.
Yeah.
How do you feel about this? How did you come out? How did you do this? How did you like whatever the discussion is? And and what you'll notice is that you will build friends and people that are just really like good people. And if somebody's really closed off and they're offended, well, then that's on them because if you're coming at it with a place of love and curiosity and kindness, well, it's like, what more can you do?
Right.
They're clearly
They can accept your invitation or not.
exactly. Exactly. And it's just interesting when you do that, how much you can learn from other people and go, wow, like you've been through some stuff and even stuff that I can now go, if I are good examples, if I only ever learned from my path
Hmm.
and blinders to everybody else, well, this is all I'm ever going to learn. But if I can branch a little bit this way and branch a little bit that way, well, look at how much wider my path got. Now I can learn from these people and I can just keep doing that.
Exactly. And imagine those paths, because when I guess you just helped me understand my really big passion. It's taking ancient wisdom and understandings and bringing
Mhm.
it into modern day knowledge and understandings and offering it. So what you just described is in one stream of ancient wisdom, it was known that every constellation has a point of view.
Mm,
The 12 constellations, Virgo, we're in Pisces right now. Um, you know, the signs of the zodiac has a point of view, and each of them is true, but it's not the whole truth. If you want
Mm.
the whole truth, you have to be able to move through 12 positions of looking at something, and out of the middle arises the wholesome truth.
It's so funny because that's such a great analogy for looking at any problem,
Yeah.
looking at any issue that we have in society and the world, and even just a problem just with you and a partner,
Yeah.
right? It's like there's a bunch of different perspectives. And that's where, to tie it back to what you've talked about before, is that's why you need that mastermind. And that's where having a coach and having someone like yourself, an educator, and someone that can hold the space, be curious, and ask questions will present those other views. Again, whether it's you're in a relationship, right? That's a tough one because it's so emotionally charged all the time, but it's always, oh, it's my view, it's mine. It's like, well, no, there's like a bunch of different angles here, right? A good, or even in a business or when dealing with trauma or anything like that, there's a few different angles.
Yeah.
So that's a really good way to put it.
Nice. Awesome.
Yeah, I love that. So to again, we could go on this for so long because I feel like we could just unpack so much. And I love that you're bringing ancient wisdom into normal society. And I want to like amplify that, right? Amplify it and put it in a term that anybody, any Joe that's never dove down into self-discovery, healing, or any of that world could just go, oh, that's a cool message. And that's something that they can understand. So my question for you is, what are those one or two messages for people like that?
I guess the first thing that comes up is to let people know they're worth it. They're worth their own effort,
Mm,
worth their own effort to self-develop, and we always can. And the
yeah.
other thing is this sense of having loving acceptance of myself and others, that we're all in a path of discovery, we're all in a path, and having patience and encouragement and support and witnessing that's unconditional for each other.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's what I would say.
I love that. And, it makes me think too, I've heard this before. I can't remember where I read it, but essentially it's like when you learn to self-love, it's like as soon as you learn to self-love, you stop judging,
Yeah.
right? Because now it's like I accept all of me and all my and all my flaws and all these different versions of me because I said this before, but we can all have a range of versions of ourselves. We can be like an absolute, hero or heroine. That's the word. Thank you. um, or we can be just an absolute villain.
Yeah.
But when we just love the whole realm and just say, hey, this is just all that is me, that's when you stop judging.
Yeah.
That's when you stop saying that person's this and that person's that. It's going, oh no, they're showing this side of themselves right now. Maybe this other side needs some love or attention. So I think, like you said, is that self-love and that we're worth it. I
Yeah.
really think that's another route that stops a lot of people from making change
Yeah.
is that they don't feel that they're worth it. Um, and I said it earlier is that we all have gifts. And one of my
Hmm.
favorite things in these discussions, in any discussion with people, is what is that gift? Like
Right.
what is your gift? And they most time they don't know, but as you get to know somebody, you can see like, oh, you really have this ability to just see something and you can build that thing in your mind in minutes and you could do it in a few weeks. It's like, wow, I don't know which tool to even start with, right? Or you be able to see the good in somebody and be able to pull that out of them,
Yeah.
right?
Well, and be open to surprise as well. You just reminded me of, because sometimes we have amazing effect on people and have no idea.
Hmm.
No idea. Years and years and years ago, after I had long finished doing youth counseling in the town that I lived in, I was in an establishment in the public washroom, and I was washing my hands, and this woman came out, young woman, and said, "Oh, Barbara, I'm so happy to see you. I was hoping I'd get to see you." And I'm like, "Oh, I don't even know who this is." at all. And then she said, you know that thing you said to me? And then I realized, oh, this is a young person. This is a woman who I counseled when she was probably 14 years old, and she's probably 25 or 26 now.
Oh,
And she,
wow.
you remember that thing you said to me? It saved my life.
Wow.
Saved my life. I was going to go home. I mean, it's the classic story. I was going to go home, and I had lost all hope. I was just done. But because of that thing you said, everything changed. And I've hoped that I would see you again so that I could say thank you. I have
That's
no
really cool.
idea. I have no idea what I said.
But you know what? It's so cool. Sorry, I'm not cheering up over here. That's so cool, but it just goes to show you how you were speaking from the heart.
Exactly. When we just show up,
Yeah.
we know what to give. The work is
Yeah.
showing.
Yeah. Absolutely. And when you're able to, like again, to tie back to what you talked about before, is to stay emotionally fit.
Yeah.
When you're able to address those feelings and just notice them, when you're able to do this work, how you're feeling, non-judging, all that, it's so much easier to say the right thing at the right time and to look
It
at
just
things with a positive view. You say the right thing at the right time, right? And that's where these tools, and again, thank you for sharing those ones, but that's where those tools are so valuable. And for anybody listening, it doesn't matter what walk you're in, it's like these are tools that can apply to any scenario, which is so amazing and so wonderful and so valuable. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for that last story there. That was so wonderful. And my hope for anybody listening is that you take and learn something from this, and maybe you'll be able to say something to the right person at the right time. Maybe something just as wonderful as what Barbara has, but maybe better, maybe different. But either way, when you have those practices in place, amazing things can happen. So thank you so much, Barbara, for being on the show. I really appreciate you taking time to be here. If anybody wants to reach out to you or has questions, how can they get a hold of you?
we can share my email with them, I guess that would be a way to do it.
Absolutely. So what I'll do is I'll link it to the notes. If somebody has questions, because Barbara's doing just some amazing work, and that we could have a whole discussion on the ancient medicines and tying that in, and maybe that's another episode. We'll do that. But thank you so much for being on the episode. Appreciate you, and we will chat again soon, I'm sure.
Thanks for all you're doing, Nathaniel.
So thank you so much for listening to this episode. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to do that. If you haven't yet, please subscribe, please share, because that's what helps this podcast grow and be able to reach more people. And why wouldn't you want to share something like that with somebody if you really enjoyed it? If you haven't yet, I'd also encourage you to go to lifepurposely.ca. My wonderful wife, Emily, sends out weekly content to help you improve your life and to think differently and to make wonderful changes that can impact your life forever. So thank you again for listening. I'll catch you on the next episode.